In this lesson, we're going to read a news article together so you can improve all areas of your English. You'll expand your vocabulary, learn advanced grammar, and improve your pronunciation at the same time. And this article discusses a current event. The state of California is suing the Trump administration over the recently imposed tariffs. Welcome back to JForrest English. Of course, I'm Jennifer. Now let's get started. Our headline: California strikes back and sues Trump over tariffs. First of all, do you know what this means, to strike back? If you strike back, it means someone attacked you or threatened you, and then you respond in an equally forceful way. So in this case, the way California is striking back is by suing Donald Trump because of the tariffs. So you can sue someone over something. That's to state the reason why you're suing someone. And of course, to sue someone means to take legal action against someone. It could be a something as well. You can sue a corporation, a company, an organization. Let's review this example. My boss fired me. So if someone fires someone, it means they permanently end the employment. But my boss fired me for no reason, which is illegal in North America. So I struck back. Notice here, this is strike in the past simple. So I struck back. Now, how did you strike back? You can use by, and then because by is a preposition, you would put your next verb in the ing. By suing the company. Yes, you can sue a person, but you can also sue the company. Don't worry about taking notes because I summarize everything in a free lesson PDF. You can find the link in the description. Now let's keep reading the article together. California governor, so this is the abbreviation for the word governor. California governor, Gavin Newsom, so this man here. California Governor Gavin Newsom sued the Trump administration. So here, of course, we have the verb sue in the past simple. Sued, because it's a verb, to sue. Sued the Trump administration. So notice, this is important because it's not Donald Trump as a person, it's the Trump administration. So this is an organization, the Trump administration. And it's also not Gavin Newsom as an individual, it's him as the governor of California. And when did this happen? On Wednesday. So notice that preposition, of course, on Wednesday. Let's keep reading. Challenging the president's authority to impose sweeping tariffs that have set off a global trade war. Notice that challenging is in the ing form. This is the present participle. It's giving you more information about the last clause, which is what I've highlighted here. So when you see the verb in the ing form, it tells you either why, who, how, more information. Challenging the president's authority to impose. This is the verb choice that you use with a tariff. You impose a tariff. In the context of the government imposes laws, imposes policies. A corporation can impose a dress code, how you're supposed to dress. So companies can impose things as well. Now let's review a sweeping tariff. So sweeping is an adjective here. Of course, you may know the verb to sweep. So you could say, I'm sweeping. Right now, I'm sweeping. But in this case, it's an adjective. Now, sweeping tariffs mean broad or wide-ranging, wide-reaching tariffs. So if your company says we're going to introduce sweeping changes, it means across all different departments or addressing all different issues. So it sounds like a lot of changes. And these sweeping tariffs have set off. a global trade war. So in this case, the phrasal verb to set off means to cause something to happen. Is the reason why something happened or started. You can think of it as the trigger or the catalyst. Here's an everyday example using this phrasal verb. I burned my cookies and set off the fire alarm. So the reason why the fire alarm started was because I burned my cookies. And of course, there was smoke produced from that. So this is the catalyst, the reason why. So that's how we use set off. Or you can even use this phrasal verb positively to say improving my English has set off many career opportunities. So it's the reason why these career opportunities happened. It was the trigger or the catalyst. So put let's go, put let's go in the comments if you're excited for these new career opportunities that will be set off. Once you improve your English, put let's go in the comments. Are you enjoying this lesson? If you are, then I want to tell you about the Finally Fluent Academy. This is my premium training program where we study native English speakers from TV, movies, YouTube, and the news so you can improve your listening skills of fast English, expand your vocabulary with natural expressions, and learn advanced grammar easily. Plus, you'll have me as your personal coach. You can look in the description for the link to learn more, or you can go to my website and click on Finally Fluent Academy. Now let's continue with our lesson. The lawsuit argues. So once you sue someone and you submit those documents to the legal system, to the courts, it becomes a lawsuit. So the lawsuit represents the documents that have been submitted to address this legal issue. So the lawsuit argues. The use of to argue is very common in a legal or formal academic context to mean to provide information with evidence. Now, the use of this word to argue is different from the use of this word to argue. You may be more familiar with it in this terminology. I argued with my boss. I argued with my husband, my wife, my sister, my mother. So that is to fight with, to have a disagreement with. I argued with my boss over, that's the preposition. You can also use about, so I'll add that. Both of them can be used here. Over the sweeping, this should be changes. The sweeping changes. I argued with my boss over the sweeping changes and then he fired me. What comes next? So I'm going to strike back by suing him. This is simply to use the vocabulary that we've already learned. Let's keep going. The lawsuit argues in the present simple. The lawsuit argues that President Donald Trump's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. So this is the official name of an act, which is a government policy that is legal. So you can enforce it because it's a legal document. To impose tariffs. So remember, we learned that the verb impose is used with tariffs to mean to introduce. To impose tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China, and a 10% tariff on all imports. So you could say a 10% sweeping tariff on imports, because that would represent this all. You could say sweeping tariffs is unlawful. So just to repeat this concisely, the lawsuit argues that this act doesn't have the authority to impose the tariffs. Let's continue. The act, so we know that this is the name of the act. The act enables a president to freeze. So here, enable, this is also quite a formal word choice, which makes sense since the legal field generally uses very formal vocabulary. And in this context, someone enables
or something enables someone or something, and it means that something, in this case the act, gives the someone, the president, the authority or the power to do something. The act enables a president to freeze or block transactions. Let's review these two verbs because they are used in an everyday context as well. So to freeze transactions, this means that it stops the movement of transactions. So a transaction could be money coming in or out or going from one account to another. So the bank may freeze your account, which means you can't do anything. You can't move money in, you can't move money out, you can't transfer money from one account to another. They could do this for your security if they think there is a threat to your bank account, or it could be because you owe money or for a legal reason. You could say, my bank froze my account. So that's the past simple of freeze. And remember, this is a verb. My bank froze my account while I was traveling abroad because they thought there was a security risk because there were transactions in Thailand, but you live in North America. Or you could say my bank blocked the purchase. So they can block a specific transaction, which means you go to pay for a car in Thailand and it says declined because they think it's suspicious or maybe there's some other reason. So let's review this part again. The act enables a president to freeze and block transactions in response to foreign threats, but doesn't allow the president to adopt tariffs, the suit says. So notice that they used the suit. This is the short form of the lawsuit. And yes, it's the exact same word for a matching outfit, top and bottoms. That is a suit. But in this case, the suit represents the lawsuit. Notice that pronunciation. I know this confuses a lot of students. Suit, oot, oot. It is not pronounced how the spelling looks. Oot, suit. The suit says. Says is a everyday word. You could also say the suit argues because it provides this information with evidence or as support to why they are suing. Now let's talk about adopt, because before we talked about how you impose tariffs. So when you impose tariffs, it means you force those tariffs on others. But before you do that, you have to first adopt the tariff, which means that you choose to use them. So you decide that you will use tariffs. And then after you adopt them, the next step is to impose them. Let's continue. The lawsuit, remember we could just say the suit, which was filed in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California. So here, notice the verb with a lawsuit is you file a lawsuit, which means you submit the documents in a legal or official way. So you can think of it as submit, but in the context of a lawsuit, we always use the verb you file a lawsuit. Now, this information between the commas is additional information, so we can read the sentence without it, and it must be grammatically correct. The lawsuit also argues, so again, that verb argue, which means states with evidence or supporting information. The lawsuit also argues that enacting such tariffs requires approval from Congress. Let's review this verb to enact, because now we can add an additional step. To enact means to make it official or legal. So first you can adopt tariffs, which means you decide you're going to use tariffs as a form of policy, and then the tariffs are enacted. So someone enacts them, someone approves them to be used. And then now that they're approved, the president can impose them, which means force them on you, me, everybody. So let's review that again. The lawsuit also argues that enacting such tariffs, passing them into law, making them legal, requires approval from Congress. Newsom, remember, this is the governor of California. Newsom said today that anticipating higher inflation and higher unemployment from the tariffs, he has downgraded California's economic outlook. So an economic outlook is how Newsom thinks the state of California will do economically in the future. So let's say it's a grading system of A, which is the best, B, C, D, E, F. So previously, maybe he gave the outlook a B, which was very good, but then he downgraded it to a C or a D. So to downgrade means to reduce. So he has downgraded California's economic outlook in a revised budget. Revised. So notice that pronunciation, revised. So a revised budget means there was an original budget, but then changes were made and there's a new budget. So that would be a revised budget. That's the adjective form. So the verb is to revise something. We need to revise the budget. We need to make changes to it, maybe because we have new information or there was some event that took place. Now, the noun form is revisions. So your boss could ask you, have you made the revisions yet? So the revisions represents the changes. Now, you could equally say we need to revise, change, or modify the budget. And then the noun forms of those are, have you made the revisions, changes, modifications yet? So now you have 3 new words. You know how to use it as the verb form, the noun form, and the adjective form, revised, changed, or modified. So you just add the ed to make it the adjective form. Let's keep reading. In a revised budget proposal that he plans to unveil next month. So if he plans to unveil it next month, it means that it is not publicly available right now. So I can't look at it, you can't look at it. So to unveil something means that the public can see it for the first time. Let's keep going. Though he did not speak to Trump about the lawsuit, he said he gave the White House a heads up. Do you know what a heads up is? A heads up is advanced warning. So before he filed the lawsuit officially, he called the White House and said, just to let you know, I'm filing a lawsuit. Just FYI, just a heads up, I'm filing a lawsuit. So he gave advanced warning or information before he did it. And notice the use of this though. This is the short, casual way of saying although. And it's used for a contrasting idea because he did not speak to Trump, but he did speak to the White House. So there's a contrast there. And that's why we use though. Let's keep going. The news of the tariffs also tanked the stock market. So it means that it caused it to perform very badly. A huge risk for California, which depends disproportionately on income tax revenue from capital gains earned by the wealthiest taxpayers. Revenue represents the money that a government earns. It's also used in a business context, so the money that a company earns. Now, in this case, the revenue specifically from income tax, because the government receives revenue from different sources. One of those sources is income tax revenue, but it's going even further. Well, income tax revenue has many different sources as well. So in this case, it's income tax revenue from capital gains earned by the wealthiest taxpayers. So a capital gains is when let's say you have a stock in the company and the value of that stock went up and you earn interest from it. You have to pay tax on that interest earned. That is a capital gain. Let's review disproportionately. This is an adverb. So proportionally would mean that the amounts are even or make sense, but disproportionately means that something is too large or even too small compared to something else. For example, the small team did a disproportionate amount of work. So here, disproportionate is an adjective. It describes the amount of work. So it could be either too much or too small, too little compared to another team. Or you can say she spends money disproportionately on clothes. So there is her total amount of money, and then this much goes to clothes, and this much goes to food or investments or education. So she spends money disproportionately on clothes. Let's keep going. The state, this means the state of California. So you could also just say California, because the articles are not used with proper nouns like California, Los Angeles, but state does take an article. So the state or California. The state is also particularly vulnerable to other economic pain from the tariffs because China is California's largest trading partner. Now let's review vulnerable. If you're vulnerable to something, it means that you can easily be affected and negatively affected by something. So you can say children are vulnerable to colds. They're easily affected by them, and the consequences are quite severe. Children and the elderly are vulnerable. Let's continue. Propping up manufacturing, agriculture, tourism, and major ports. So remember, this is because China is California's largest trading partner. So propping up in this context means supporting. This phrasal verb is commonly used in construction and repairs. For example, we need to prop up the ceiling. So maybe you put a steel beam or a wood beam or something to support, because remember, to prop up means support. We need to prop up the ceiling because it's vulnerable to water. So remember, if it's vulnerable, it means it can easily be affected and negatively affected by water. So we need to support the ceiling so it doesn't flood. Let's continue. Other significant potential impacts for California include driving up the cost of construction materials. So driving up means increasing the cost or causing the cost to rise. Now, this is used in the context of something causes something else to increase. So we could say the tariffs drove up. So drove is the past simple of to drive. In this case, it's used in the ing form. The tariffs drove up the price of cars. So this is like saying the tariffs caused the price of cars to increase or to rise. Other significant potential impacts for California include driving up the cost of construction materials, just as Los Angeles begins rebuilding from a series of devastating fires in January. So this rebuilding, it means building again, and they have to build the buildings. They have to build the buildings again because they were destroyed by the devastating fires in January. And devastating means causing a lot of damage or destruction. Now that's the end of the article. What I'll do now is I'll read the article from start to finish, and this time you can focus on my pronunciation. California strikes back and sues Trump over tariffs. California Governor Gavin Newsom sued the Trump administration on Wednesday, challenging the president's authority to impose sweeping tariffs that have set off a global trade war. The lawsuit argues that President Donald Trump's use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China, and a 10% tariff on all imports is unlawful. The act enables a president to freeze and block transactions in response to foreign threats, but doesn't allow the president to adopt tariffs, the suit says. The lawsuit, which was filed in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California, also argues that enacting such tariffs requires approval from Congress. Newsom said today that, anticipating higher inflation and higher unemployment from the tariffs, he has downgraded California's economic outlook in a revised budget proposal that he plans to unveil next month. Though he did not speak to Trump about the lawsuit, he said he gave the White House a heads up. The news of the tariffs also tanked the stock market, a huge risk for California, which depends disproportionately on income tax revenue from capital gains earned by the wealthiest taxpayers. The state is also particularly vulnerable to other economic pain from the tariffs because China is California's largest trading partner, propping up manufacturing, agriculture, tourism, and major ports. Other significant potential impacts for California include driving up the cost of construction materials just as Los Angeles begins rebuilding from a series of devastating fires in January.
Do you want to keep learning English with the news? If you do, put let's go in the comments. And of course, make sure you like this lesson, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you're notified every time I post a new lesson. And you can get this free speaking guide where I share 6 tips on how to speak English fluently and confidently. You can click here to download it or look for the link in the description. And here's another lesson I know you'll love. Watch it now.